I'm always paranoid about recording. Might say a
It
nerdy,
says it's recording now, John.
might say a nerdy word or something, and
Yeah.
we'll try not to. The other part of the other question about having the neighbors with the crops, if they can give you a heads up on the insecticides, that'd be what I would worry about, because a lot of these insecticides are so specific to, maybe if they're spraying BT for worms, and a lot of the corn's already got the BT gene in it, so that's going to be relatively safe. But then they come in and they're trying to kill stink bugs in soybeans. They're going to use a pyrethroid, and it's going to smoke your bees if they're in there working. But like I said last night, you're better off losing those bees in the field. I mean, you don't want to lose half your workforce, but you're better off to lose the workforce out in the field as having one wounded bee come in with enough toxic insecticide on, and when he comes in, they're going to blow it around and it'll kill them all. So in a way, the pesticides have gotten safer because they just don't use broad spectrum insecticides anymore. Organophosphates, those products, basically you put them out there and they kill every living insect that's on those crops. So now they go with more BT products, and then they'll go with some type of pyrethroid to kill the hard-shelled insects, and that's the one that's going to really be hard on your bees. I know some of the hives that we've had major losses with in town in Winchester, they were sprayed with malathion, and they were off-label spraying because I didn't turn in the city, but I think somebody did. But what it was, it clearly says on the label for mosquito control, it says when people or animals are not present, and it's got a like a daylight deal on it before they can actually go through and spray malathion and fog all these neighborhoods for mosquitoes. But some of our worst losses that I've seen since I've had bees has been from mosquito spraying. But work on that relationship with that farmer, and if he says, I'm spraying beans tomorrow, I mean, I know when they spray soybeans, you're talking about 100-degree temperatures, so you may have to put some kind of ventilation screen on them, and as soon as that spraying's over, when you turn them out, first place they're going to fly, if those beans are blooming, they're going to fly right into those beans. But it can be done. I've been successful with bees right next to soybean fields and crop fields. Corn don't bother me as much because the corn don't get a whole lot of insecticides. We got any more questions?
No more in chat, John.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about some equipment, and the guy that did this talk, he came last year to our in-person class that we had last February, and he's a real good guy, and we've had a lot of people that actually go and support them down at Murfreesboro. They're actually he bought out to Trevor Qualls's Bon Aqua Springs, and he moved it to Murfreesboro, and his last name is Sales, and I can never remember his first name, but you can search Bon Aqua Springs and in Murfreesboro, and he has real good bee supplies. And he did this talk, and that's his family. It's Dave Sales, and they have homemade bee boxes, and they have frames and foundation that they sell, and all types of bee equipment.
Somebody just said their sound disappeared.
Hey, John's, somebody just typed in and said Bonacqua Springs has changed their name to Maple Bend Bee Supply.
Yeah, I knew they'd changed. It's but it's still Dave Sales, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's still Dave. It's just the name change.
What about sound? Can everybody hear me? Okay, somebody lost their sound. One thing, some people asked questions last night about top bar hives, ware hives, that sort of thing. Langstroth hives is what you really want to start with. And basically, either 8 or 10 frames wide. The law says they have to be movable frames so we can inspect for disease and problems. We're going to skip over the ware hive. And I talked to y'all last night about what I think about the top bar hive. After you've kept bees about 7 or 8 years, get you a top bar hive, and then Dr. Collison is going to talk a little bit about, hopefully, how a beehive works. Bee colonies, if you notice in nature, they don't work sideways. They'll go so far, but bees don't like to go 5 or 6 feet sideways. They like to go 12, 14, 18, 20 inches, and then they like to go vertical. It's just how they've adapted to the weather and the climate and their honey stores and all that. And when you get a top bar hive, you have to really watch, or you can't even inspect it. You have to let them raise several cycles of brood in them before you can even pull those frames out. My personal opinion, I wouldn't have one.
John, there's a notice across the screen that it's being recorded. It's covered up most of your picture here.
It's covering up most of mine.
Yeah, covered up that.
I think that's just a setting on your personal device. You can go in and click down at the bottom on and adjust your view option, or if you're on a laptop or desktop, it's at the top where it says view options, and then you can change that.
Yeah, that's probably on David's end.
Okay.
Dave had these stands available last year, and I thought they were pretty neat. One thing I like about the stand he's got here is the height off the ground. I think these would be really handy if you were, putting your package in or starting your hive off, and once it gets so big, and if you want to move it and put it on something a little more strong. These are sturdy. I just don't know how well they'll hold up against a really big mature beehive. Okay, we got all types of bottom boards. The one that we mostly recommend now is a screened bottom board. What that does, it's a natural varroa mite control aid. Any mite that falls off a bee and goes through that screen and gets on the ground, odds are he's not going to survive long enough to reattach to a bee. If you've got a solid bottom board, and people still all over still have solid bottom boards, but what happens, that varroa mite will fall off and crawl around there, and if it don't die, when a bee comes by, that varroa mite will jump on that honeybee. So basically, the screen bottom boards are a IPM control method for varroa mites. Some people have screen bottom boards with a tray, and then you can use that tray as a mite count board. Actually, you slip in the white chloroplast board, and you can paint it with some tanglefoot. And when the mites hit it, it'll stick to them, and then you can actually pull that out after so many days and count those varroa mites. The other tray that he's got in, some of his are designed where they hold a lunch tray. And if your hive's really level, you can put vegetable oil or diatomaceous earth, and it helps with the small hive beetle control as well. I talked about the super sizes and boxes last night. I tend to go towards medium boxes or Illinois boxes for everything: honey, brood, whole 9 yards. That way I don't have all these different sizes. And I like the brood pattern on mediums. A lot of times in the medium boxes, they'll lay wall-to-wall brood, and then the next super up will have that outer band. The next frame up will have that outer band of pollen or honey. But I think per square inch, I think they do a lot better brood pattern on mediums. And a deep, after you picked one of them up full of honey, you'll say, why did I do this? Now, when I started keeping bees in 96, everybody used double deep brood chambers for all your brood room, and then use shallows or medium for honey supers. But if you think about two deeps or three Illinois, it's about the same brood room area. And all the time I get questions, do I need a queen excluder? I think everybody ought to buy them one or two, maybe see how you like it. But I think about this every time I go to Bass Pro Shop. You know, they got a turnstile when you walk through there to count, see how many people came and exited the store during the day. I don't know if it's just me, maybe I'm a little bit wider, but every time when I go through that turnstile, I got to turn sideways or I got to nearly stop to go through that thing. So if you're got a major honey flow going, if you've got a major honey flow going and you got a queen excluder on there, you think about all those bees having to work through that slotted area. And basically anywhere you put that queen excluder, if you've got drones above it, or if you trap your queen above it, I've done that before. You have to have an entrance for the drones to come out and exit the hive, or they'll get trapped above it and they'll die. And if you put your queen up there, where you think you're going to have all of your eggs in your brood? It's going to be above the queen excluder. So if we're going to use a queen excluder, we need to know just exactly where our queen is and make sure we put her where we want her, or she's in the box we want her to be in before we install that queen excluder. Basically, queen excluders are to trap her so she don't lay brood up in your honey super. In nature, the bees will not 100%, probably 75% of the time, the bees will put a band of honey above the brood. And sure as I say that, my queen will go across it, but per se, 75 or 80% of the time, that queen won't cross that honey barrier, and she'll stay in the brood chamber. But that's one, people that do real high dollar cut comb or are selling packages, they'll use a lot of queen excluders because they want to know exactly where that queen's at. They don't want to shake their queen out in a package of bees and send it and then put another queen in there with them. So there are reasons to use queen excluders. We got all types of hive top feeders. This one is a good design because the bees can access it from the bottom, but they can't get in there and drown. The only bees that could drown in this feeder would be some that come under your inner cover top and or your lid. We don't recommend a lot of entrance feeders just because you've got this food right at the front of your hive. And if you started a bunch of packages and one of them gets ahead of the other ones and it smells that sugar syrup at the front of your other hive, it may start robbing. Got other types of feeders where you actually put this on top of the frames and you use a one-piece mason jar lid. You can't use cannon rings or lids because the bees' tongues are too short. They can't reach through the wire screen. So people ask, I put my feeder on 3 days ago and they're not taking any of my sugar syrup. Well, if you use a 2-piece cannon lid for a jar, the bees' tongues are not long enough. So you got to use a 1-piece lid. It's smoother. The inner cover may be, well, I know in the winter time and throughout the year, the inner cover is really important. In the spring, when your bees are starting to build up, basically, if you don't have an inner cover, there's nothing to stop them from building wax all the way to the top and all the way on the bottom of your lid. But one of the main goals of a inner cover is for ventilation. And Dr. Collison will probably talk a little bit more about ventilation tonight, but bees create air movement in that hive. And they're trying to basically remove excess moisture. Some people will even use a screened inner cover. If they're going to move their hive in hot weather, they'll go and install this maybe a couple of days before. And that way on a hot night, or if they're worried about them getting too hot while they're moving them, they'll just take their lid off and the bees can't get out. And the outer cover just protects, keeps water and other bees from entering in the top and robbing the hive out from in the top. But also the way we've been having winds recently, and you need to have some kind of weight on that, or a good idea if you've got hives around livestock, just put you a ratchet strap around your whole hive. We found some this in January, early January, where the horses had knocked them over. And yes, they were sideways, but they were still together. So that was a lot better than them falling over and busting apart and then the bees chilling and freezing to death. What this figure showing you is basically 8-frame hive versus a 10-frame. The 8-frame is basically probably 3.5, 4 inches narrower than the 10-frame equipment. It's a lot lighter for people to pick up. And this is what I was talking about last night. If you get behind and you need a box, and you got a neighbor that's got new equipment, he may have new 8-frame and you may have new 10-frame equipment. The only thing in that setup that'll work is the frames. There's all types of frame sizes. Your shallow box is on the far left. Then your medium or Illinois is in the middle, and then your deep brood frames on the right. And I recommend using natural wax foundation. And if you get a bee catalog and you start looking, frames and wax, it's like looking at options on a car. It gets so confusing. But I will tell you, when you order a certain type frame, make sure when you order that you tell them that you want the same number of wax that's supposed to fit that frame, or you're going to have all your frames together, and then this wax is so pliable and it's fragile, you'll tear a lot of it up trying to make it work in your frame. So it needs to match, the wax needs to match the frame. I don't even recommend plastic cell foundation. The only 2 times I would ever recommend it, a lot of your drone foundation, people put in drone foundation to help raise drones, to mate with queens, or to use for varroa mite trapping. People use those. And also a black frame if you're trying to learn how to see eggs. But trust me, that's the only 2 times that I would ever even think about using plastic cell foundation. 100%, they've got wax applied to them, but it's not, the bees know that it's not 100% wax foundation. Okay. By using smaller 8-frame hives, it helps to condense the cluster. And it's basically a more natural size that you would see in nature. If they were in a hollow tree, you would see these narrow combs, but they may be 5, 6, 7 foot tall inside that tree. It's just heat conservation, and it's the narrower the hive, it's more natural the way the bees want to work. We talked about standardizing equipment last night. It just means going with one size box for everything. But I recommend mediums, and a lot of the industries go into mediums. What do I need? We talked about the basics last night. You need to make sure you always protect your face. The bees know where that CO2 is coming from. They know your most vulnerable spot. So you go out there and you surprise your beehive and you get stung. Where you think you're going to get stung? On the head or around your face, and you can easily lose your eyesight if you get stung in the eye. So you definitely want a veil. We don't even, at field days, we don't even let people get out of the car or come to the field days without a veil. It's just bare minimum. You got to have a veil. Now, if you want to get stung all over the rest of your body, that's fine. In hot weather, experienced beekeepers, sometimes I'll wear shorts and maybe a pollinator jacket or maybe a veil, but I'm going to have my head covered no matter what. We talked about a lot of people, when they start out, they like the gloves, the smoker, hive tool, and this bee brush. You need to use a bee brush 2 or 3 times, and you'll figure out that bees are really not made to be brushed. But there is a way and Dr. Collison may talk about it in his work in the hive. There's a proper way to brush bees. And we've also found that we've got some old horsehair brushes. They seem to not get as agitated with that as they do these nylon bristles. Maybe there's a little bit softer. He's got average startup cost in here. It's from last year. I don't know how much it had really changed, but and this would be from his equipment, and this is for 2 hives. And what you would probably need to get through the first year. A lot of people will buy a beginner kit and they'll get a couple of boxes, maybe 1 hive body, bottom board, inner cover, hive top. And that's good for about 45 days. And then you're going to have to start adding more boxes. So this is probably a pretty good ballpark number that he's got down here. This was for last year. And I'm going to go back. His phone number may be the same. I don't know what happened. I think his phone number is the same.
It just came up on mine.
It did, the phone number. Okay. All right, we're gonna try to take some questions, and if we want to take a break or want to let Dr. Collison go ahead and go. I stopped sharing.
You bet. Stay here and make sure I get going.
Okay.
I gotta go back to your desktop.
Minimize this where we can.
Okay.
I don't know why that done it. You just want to do inspection first.
Yeah. No, gotta share it or.
Got to end it first.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, let's minimize it. Okay, we'll maximize here. And then you start slideshow from the beginning. Let's move over there to the beginning. I don't know why we can't see them anymore, but
Okay.
they can see us, I'm sure.
Yeah, your presentation's up, Dr. Collison.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tonight I want to talk to you about how do you go about working colonies of bees and examining your colony of bees. As beginners, naturally, you're going to be reluctant to spend much time examining your hives because of the stinger. This is a scanning electron micrograph of a stinger of a worker honeybee. You can see it's got barbs on it. That's why when you get stung, the stinger remains in your skin, and as it pulsates, it works its way deeper and deeper. Even though you have this natural fear of getting stung, with proper clothing and equipment and knowing how to handle bees, it can be safe and not difficult. Here, this several years ago at a 4-H entomology camp, I'm demonstrating hives to the 4-Hers. As you can see here, they had veils on, except for the one fellow. I don't know why he's there without a veil, and you can see I just was doing it in a short sleeve shirt. So knowing how to do it and how to use smoke, etc., it will not be dangerous, except when you're robbing the bees or that they've been disturbed by skunks or armadillos or something and they're agitated. Knowing when to do it and how to do it, there's a minimum a chance of you getting stung. That's not to say you won't occasionally get stung. As we talked about last night, there's two basic tools that you need in working bees. We have a smoker here, and we have the hive tool. And as John talked to you last night about, the hive tool is used to pry the combs apart. Bees glue everything together with a material called propolis. And so you have to break that seal, and you do that by using your hive tool. There are several different designs of hive tools, but they all accomplish the same thing. The smoker is by far the most important. And you need to begin by lighting a fire in the firebox of the smoker. And I like to start with a small piece of newspaper, as you see here, and I stick that in and I light it. And then with my hive tool, I push it down and I begin adding additional fuel while I'm pumping the bellows. As I said, we start out with paper to light it, and there are many different smoker fuels that you can use. You can use pine straw, punk wood, corn cobs, rolled up cardboard, old bark, wood shavings, old rags, burlap, and at the bottom I've got twine, but we have concerns with the use of baler twine. Many of them are treated with pesticides, and of course we do not want to light them and have the smoke containing toxic pesticides. And so we would not recommend using the twine, but any of these other materials will certainly work. In this particular case, I started it in the bottom with a piece of paper, and I've added burlap. When I was at Penn State University, the forest entomologist was doing all kinds of work with gypsy moths, and so he had burlap that he would wrap around the trunks of trees, and so we had lots of burlap, and it made an excellent fuel. Today here in Tennessee, I like to use pine straw. Why do we use smoke? Well, it's an absolute necessity in handling bees. Many times I think, oh, I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to pop the lid, just check to see is the cluster at the top. And I always regret it. You need to take the time to light the smoker. The first effect that smoke has, it calms the bees. Secondly, it repels the bees, and it causes bees to engorge on honey. In other words, this is a natural behavior. If they were living in a tree and there was a lightning storm and the forest caught on fire, when they would smell smoke, they would fill up on honey. And if they hadn't had to leave because of the forest fire, they would take a temporary food source with them. So it's natural for them to engorge on honey. And when I'm out in the bee yard working with students, I always tell them a full bee is not nearly as aggressive as an empty bee. But the other effect that smoke has is it deadens the effect of the alarm pheromone. Anytime there is a disturbance in a particular part of the hive, the bees in that particular part produce alarm pheromones. And basically what it's doing, all the bees near those bees that are releasing the alarm pheromone, which is a chemical, it puts them on alert. It basically says, be prepared to defend the hive, be prepared to attack. But the smoke deadens the effect of the alarm pheromones. And so not nearly as many bees are on alert and ready to defend when you properly use the right amount of smoke. You want to avoid sparks and flames. You don't want to singe the hairs on the bees' bodies. That just does not make them happy at all. You don't want to catch your bee yard on fire. And so you want to avoid sparks and flames. What I like to do after I've started the paper in the bottom, I've added my fuel, let's say it's pine straw. Then on top of that pine straw, I'd like to grab a handful of green grass and put on the top. It smolders. It produces lots of cool smoke, and we're not going to then have the problems with flames and sparks. We always want to approach the hive from the rear and work the hive from either side. When you stand in front of a hive, it would be equivalent to standing on a runway in an airport. Bees are constantly going in and out. And so you're going to appropriately work them from the sides of the hive, but you're going to approach the hive from the rear. Before opening up a colony of bees, you blow smoke into the hive entrance and all other cracks and openings in the stack of boxes. Then you will proceed to remove the outer telescoping cover, which her hand is laying on top of there. And then you will lift that outer telescoping cover and you will blow smoke under it. And then you may lay it back down and allow that smoke to enter from the top. So you're going to smoke the bees from the bottom. You're going to smoke the bees from the top. And then wait a few seconds, give them time to engorge on honey. And then you'll proceed to take that outer telescoping cover off and laying it on the ground inside up, because we use that to stack our supers on, as I'll show you in another slide. All right, when you have a hive open for a period of time, you see the bees naturally come to the top. So it's covered with bees. If you want to reach in there and remove some of those frames, obviously you want to repel all those bees. And you do that by gently puffing puffs of smoke over it. After you've puffed smoke, you see now the top bars of the combs are basically free of bees. So it drives the bees downward. And then you can proceed to begin to remove your first comb.
Dr. Collison?
Yes.
A question came in. How long does it usually take for them to engorge?
We're talking a minute or less. They immediately go and puncture a capping with their tongue, and then suck the honey right out of the cell under the capping. So it does not take very long. Now, if you were opening up a colony and you wanted to remove comb honey, you want to use a minimal amount of smoke, because you don't want your comb honey to have holes in the cappings. I've judged numerous honey shows, And every once in a while, I'll see an entry that has a few holes in the cappings from using smoke when they were removing it.
Most people don't wait long enough
Yeah, most people do not wait long enough.
to get hurt.
So a minute or two should be sufficient for you then to proceed. We're going to, as we tear the colony down and we remove the boxes, I can't see it real good here. It's not a good slide, but we have the bottom board laying on the ground, inner surface up, and then we set the hives boxes off as we take them off and set them and use that as a floor, so that we don't set them into the grass, into the dirt. We set them on the outer telescoping cover. The amount of smoke you use will vary from colony to colony. They all react differently. And some colonies will require lots of smoke and other colonies will require very little. Again, through experience, you learn how much smoke to use and how often you have to use it. When should you be going into colonies? If it's 40 degrees or warmer, you can just remove the outer telescoping cover, just lift up the inner cover slightly and see if the winter cluster is at the very top. Close it back up and go on to the next one. And the reason we need to do that is, as John said, honeybees typically want to work upward in a vertical direction. And so in the fall, the bees start out in the bottom of the hive. And over the course of the winter, they slowly eat their way upward. And we expect they're going to be found at the very top when we go into them the first time in the spring. But if they're at the very, very top, we use that as an indication that they may need to be fed. And so we often go out when it's cold, as I say, 40 or above, and just quickly pop the lid to see is the cluster at the very top or not. If it's 50 degrees, we can maybe pull 1 or 2 combs and just quickly check the brood, but we don't want to have just totally break the colony down because the brood will become chilled. If it's 65 degrees and above, then we can do a thorough examination and work our way throughout the entire brood box or brood chambers if we need to. Now, when you're beginning and learning how to work bees, ideally, the best time to work bees is when they're actively flying on a clear, warm day and between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. Now, you can work bees before that, you can work bees after that, but to have the best experience in working your bees, then ideally from about 10 to 4 would be ideal. John hinted at it last night, but let me reiterate on it. As bees age, as the workers age, they get grumpier, or we would say they get more defensive. So you want to work the bees when the old bees or the field bees are out in the flying in the field, and basically all you're working with is the sweet little house bees, so to speak, that are not nearly as defensive as the field bees. And so this is why we're saying you're going to have the best experience when the bees are actively flying. Bees are easiest to handle when there is a nectar flow. They go right on working, even though you're disturbing them. And you need to work bees slowly. Avoid quick, jerky movements. Any quick movement of your hands or things, again, just alerts them and they may react and attack you. And so you need to work slowly and carefully. I've been involved with the Master Beekeeper program in the Eastern Apiculture Society, and they had to take written test, they had to take a laboratory test, they had to take a field test. And some bees, some individuals, when they take their field test, you can tell they're scared out of their mind. They're not comfortable working bees, and they work too slow. Okay, so you can work quickly, but try to avoid those quick, jerky movements. Now, when you remove the first comb, you want to be careful not to roll the bees. You want to take your hive tool and you want to pry from the outside inward and move the combs as far away from the outer edge as possible, and then loosen that first comb and remove that first comb and try not to roll many bees. You'll find that bees do not heavily work the two outer combs. And so normally we would recommend that you remove the first comb on the side of the hive in which you're working first. Some individuals will go in and always remove the second comb, but they have a much greater chance of rolling bees and possibly even killing the queen if she's on that comb than with the outer first comb. Managing the brood nest is important. And by managing the brood nest, what we're saying is it's important that you examine it periodically and check to see what's going on. Check to see, is there evidence that there's a queen by the presence of eggs? Looking at the brood pattern, as we talked a little bit about last evening, looking for problems. And I'll get into some of those problems you might be looking for in a moment. But it's important that on a regular basis, you examine the combs in the brood nest. Now, beginners sometimes overwork their bees. They spend too much time in them, but that's part of the learning. You're going to learn from your mistakes. And so you need to figure on once a week, once every 10 days or so, to pull some frames out of the brood nest and examine them and see what's going on. The brood nest is where the first signs of trouble can usually be found. Why do we examine brood patterns? First of all, it tells us the overall condition of the colony. Is it a nice, large, elliptical brood pattern, as we described last night? You're looking for the queen or evidence of a queen. And as we said, you don't need to see the queen. You just look for eggs. That tells you there that she's been there in the last 3 days. The quality, the solidness of the brood pattern is an indication of the quality of a queen, as I indicated last night. It tells you if there's fresh nectar coming in, if there's pollen, if there's adequate food being stored in the brood chamber. And this is where you're going to check for bee diseases, and you're going to check for varroa mites. How many frames have bees on them gives you an indication of how strong the colony is. And of course, if you see queen cells, and I showed you pictures of queen cells last night, it tells you if you have problems or not, or if the colony is preparing to swarm. As you recall, we said there are 3 different stimuli that are used in rearing of queen cells: emergency, supersedure, or preparation for swarming. Okay, here we're evaluating the queen. It's a nice solid brood pattern, as we talked about last night. And so we would conclude that this colony is headed up by an excellent queen. As we said last night, if we see a scattered brood pattern, as you see here, this can be an indication of a poor queen, but it can also be an indication that something else has gone wrong in the colony. There's been a break in the brood rearing cycle, and so you need to investigate further to try to determine why you have a scattered brood pattern. Now, we told you last evening that there are worker size cells and there are drone size cells. And we described the difference between the cappings of a worker cell and that of a drone size cell. These three, you see the bee in the center of the slide, the two cells, cap cells that the bee is on, and then one just above her, you'll see they're relatively flat cappings. These would be worker size cells, but the others you see are bullet shaped. And as we described last night, these would be drone size cells. Now, when you examine the hive, you're looking for worker brood, and you may be also looking for some drone brood. But if you find only drone brood, that is an indication that your colony has what we call a drone layer. Last night we said that an unfertilized egg becomes a drone, whereas a fertilized egg becomes either a worker or a queen. If you're only seeing drone brood in the colony, only these bullet-shaped cappings, then we would say the queen is a drone layer. Now, there are two conditions that can give you a drone layer. First of all, she was prevented due to bad weather or for some other reason, she was prevented on going on her mating flight or flights. And so as a result, after about 3 weeks, she loses the urge to mate and she can only lay unfertilized eggs. Or you have an older queen that has gone on her mating flights, has stored semen in her spermatozoa, in her spermatheca, and she's run out of semen or she's run out of sperm, and so she can only lay unfertilized eggs. And once a queen mates or goes on 2 or 3 mating flights, before she begins laying eggs, she will never mate again. And so if you have a colony headed up by a drone layer, then she needs to be replaced. We said last night how important it is that you be able to see these tiny white eggs standing on end in the center of these cells, as we see here. But what do we have here? We've got multiple eggs per cell, and they're not centered in the bottom. They're on the sides in all different areas in the cell. When you find multiple eggs per cell and they're not centered, this is an indication that you have what we call laying workers. Last evening, we told you that workers are female and they're sterile females. And we said that the queen produces pheromones that does not allow the worker's ovaries to develop. Now, if your colony has gone queenless for about 2 to 3 weeks, then some of the worker ovaries will develop and they are able to lay eggs, but they can't mate. They cannot store semen. And so as a result, they can only lay unfertilized eggs. And obviously they don't know how to lay eggs when they lay several per cell and then haphazard. And so this says you've got a colony with laying workers, it's queenless, and it's probably doomed. You got a real problem on your hands. Your best bet is just to take it in the woods and brush the bees off and bring your equipment back to the house.
Yeah, Dr. Collison, a
Yes.
question just came in related to queens. It's how do you replace the queen when the bees are used to the other queen?
All right. First of all, the first step is you've got to go into the colony, find the old queen and remove her. Usually we say you kill her, but some people just do not have the heart to do that. But we won't go into that tonight. But so first of all, you have to dequeen. Then you introduce a queen in a protective cage. And hopefully the bees will release her in 48 or so hours, or you'll come back in a couple of days and release her. They have to get to know her. They have to, well, first of all, they have to realize they're queenless. And secondly, they have to get to know her and become familiar with her odor, with her pheromone bouquet or profile, as we call it. And then after she's been protected for several days, then she can be released into the population of bees. They can either release her or you can physically release her. Is that adequate answer for you? No response, we'll continue. All right, last night we talked about the pollen that's stored in the cells. We showed you this particular slide last night. You have to be able to recognize capped honey, cells containing pollen, capped worker brood, and capped drone brood. They're all evident there on that particular comb. And you always go on the looking to be looking for queen cells. But anytime you see a queen cell, that tells you you've got a problem. Now you just got to figure out, why are they producing queen cells? You should not be finding queen cells. When you have a queen present laying eggs, she produces pheromones that inhibits the bees from raising queens. But in her absence, or in her going downhill, the loss of the pheromone, then the bees, when it drops below a certain threshold, then the bees begin raising queen cells. When you look at capped brood, and here we have capped worker brood in front of us. Anytime that I see a hole in a capping, I'm going to take the edge of my hive tool and I'm going to investigate. But you'll notice we have an open cell here on this slide, and it's got a C-shaped larva lying in the bottom. That is normal until, as we said, until they stretch out lengthwise, then the bees produce a capping over the cell. All right, right next to that open cell, we have a capping that has a hole in the very center. Because that cap hole is in the very center, I'm not worried about it, because as the workers produce cappings, they build wax from the outside towards the center. But if that hole is not right in the center, then I'm concerned and I'm going to investigate further. All right, now here's a slide, a comb that definitely has problems. All right, first of all, we have a scattered brood pattern. So that's the first evidence that we've got a problem. Secondly, we have some cappings that are sunken. And if you were here sitting in the classroom with me, I would point to these, but I can't do it on the computer. But look and see if you don't see some cappings that are sunken. The third type of evidence that says we've got a problem is that you'll notice that some of these cappings have holes in them. So there is 3 kinds of evidence telling you we have a problem, and we've got to figure out what that problem is. Now, I told you that when you smoke a colony, they punch holes in the honey cappings and engorge on honey. But these are not honey cappings. These are holes in brood cappings. And so that says we have a problem.
Dr. Collison?
Yes.
Comment came in that was wondering if you can use your mouse to actually point on the slides, if that might work.
Yeah, I just did that.
Let me see. Okay.
There you go.
All right. There's there's a capping that's definitely very sunken. There's a sunken capping. There's a sunken capping. But these holes that I'm talking about, here's one, here's one, here's one. So everybody with me now? Sunken cappings, holes in the cappings, and scattered brood pattern equals problem. All right. Now, let's try and figure out what our problem is. All right, here I'm looking at 4 C-shaped larvae lying in the bottom of a cell. And they are pearly white in color. And if you remember nothing else this evening, remember white is healthy. Okay, so these are healthy larvae. Well, now here's a comb that contains some larvae where we see some discoloration. All right, see the discoloration here? Well, also, there's a second problem in this particular cell. The larva is not lying C-shaped in the bottom, it's on the side of the cell. So there's something wrong with this cell. There's something wrong with this cell because it's turning dark. There's something wrong with this larva. Now you see these white lines? This is actually their tracheal system or their breathing tubes. This one is just beginning to have a problem because you see there's a small area where it started to turn dark. So if they're not purely pearly white in color, if they've got some coloration, as you see here, that's an indication that you've got a problem, a disease problem. And this particular one that I'm looking at, it happens to be a European foul brood. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But the key point that I want you to remember now is white is healthy. All right. As we told you, some stings are inevitable. Here we see a worker that has just deposited her sting into your flesh and she's pulling away and she ultimately will die. She just sacrificed her life to defend her colony. Now, last night, John told you, you don't reach in with your 2 fingers and grab the top of that stinger to pull it out, because this sac that you see there, if I can get this cursor on it, I'm trying. Here we go. You see this sac right here? That is the venom sac. And when you reach and pinch it with your fingers to pull it out, you just force all that venom right into your skin. Now, if you don't remove this stinger quickly, you will, and you watch this stinger, you will see that the muscles continue to contract, pumping venom into you, but it's also working its way down further and further, going deeper and deeper into your skin. So it's important that you remove that as quickly as possible. When stung, you scrape the stinger away with your fingernail, hive tool, or other sharp object. Do not pull the stinger out, as I just explained why. Pulling squeezes all the venom from the poison sac into the wound. After you've taken your fingernail or your hive tool and you removed the stinger, then smoke that sting site. You have been chemically marked. In addition to depositing the stinger into your arm, she has left alarm pheromone. So you've been, so you're targeted. She's left a bullseye for others to work. And you'll find if you work without gloves and you work bees for a long period of time, if say you get stung in your right hand, you'll find over the course of the day, you'll get a lot more stings in the right hand than you will in the left hand. This is because it's been chemically marked, or you're targeted with alarm pheromones. What I like to do is to smoke the sting site after I've removed the stinger. And then I like to reach down and grab a handful of green grass and rub it on that surface, trying to mask the odor of the sting site. Okay, I guess that finishes up that. Any questions?
Dr. Collison, there's a question that came in several minutes ago, but I was kind of holding off till you were towards the end, but it's regards to yellow jackets. Somebody lost a couple of hives to yellow jackets and wanted some advice or thoughts on how maybe to attack, yellow jacket issue.
That is a difficult one to attack. My gut feeling is that was a weak colony before the yellow jackets moved in and starting attacking it and started getting food from it. Basically, only thing that I can think of that you could do is to put the entrance reducer in to reduce the size of the opening so that the bees will have a better chance of defending the entrance.
Yellow jacket traps away from your bees.
Yeah,
You don't want to draw more yellow jackets with a yellow jacket trap. So you want to build your yellow jacket trap and put it maybe close to the apiary, but not right in the apiary.
right. Did everybody hear John's comments? He said you can use a yellow jacket trap, but you can't put it right next to the hive, so to speak. It needs to be in the apiary or in the bee yard. But again, you may trap a few, but the only sure way of really reducing the yellow jacket pressure is to find the nest and kill the nest.
And that nest is probably pretty close.
Yeah, it could very well be fairly close to your hives. Other questions?
Nothing on the chat.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break while we get set up for the next one? Gotta figure out what to do here now.
I was saying that Ed puts a little bit of honey on that sting mark where they don't,
But
but you get sticky pretty quick.
He's got a 5-minute break. Why can't I just do that?
I think we can.
Okay, I think I'll go ahead and get started. Many of you are going to start your beekeeping experiences this spring by purchasing packages, and so we need to talk about how you deal with those packages when you get them. Here's a picture of 2 packages, well, actually total of 4 packages stacked on top of each other. But I want you to see these are screen cages, and you can see the bees that are clustered inside of this package as they were shipped to you, or as they came to you. You can order package bees by the pound. You can get 2 pound, 3 pound, 4 pound, 5 pound, but most people will start with a 3 pound package. They are shipped through the US mail service, unless somebody goes with a truck and picks them up and brings them back for you. If they come through the mail, first of all, notify your post office that you will be expecting some package bees, and give them the information of how they can contact you immediately upon their arrival. Because let me tell you that postal service workers do not like dealing with package bees, and they might very well leave them right out on the back loading dock, in which we don't want that to happen. So you need to be notified as soon as they arrive and go and pick them up. You must order your packages early. In fact, I suspect there are many package suppliers that are already totally booked for the spring at this point in time. The advantage of getting a package is there's a low risk of getting disease with it. As John indicated last evening, when you buy a nuke, you're buying 4 or 5 combs in which the queen is laying eggs, and there's brood present, as well as pollen and honey. But when you've got drawn comb, then you've greatly increased the chances of possibly getting disease as well. And so there's a low risk of disease with packages. And as John indicated last night, your equipment should be assembled before your packages arrive. What are disadvantages to packages? They may arrive dead or damaged during transit. Again, the Postal Service does not always handle them very well. And they may get too hot, or they may get too cold. And so they may be damaged. And most package suppliers, if your package arrives and it's dead, they will replace it. They've taken out insurance on those packages when they took them to the post office. Now, you've got a package. Your next major thing is, how do you get them out of the package into your own equipment? And the other disadvantage is that when you get a package, there is at least no new bees for at least 3 weeks. And the reason for that, as we said last night, from the time an egg is laid until a new bee emerges, a new worker bee emerges, is 21 days or 3 weeks. So your package population is going to go downhill for at least 3 weeks. And I'll show you a graph in a few minutes to further explain that. Those would be the disadvantages of packages. We said you could buy them by the pound. And a pound of bees is approximately 3,500 bees. So that would be what, 11,500 in 3 pound packages. All right. What is your desired delivery date? Well, in the north, we would say if you're going to install them on drawn combs, you'd want to get them in the first half of April. but if you're going to just be putting them on comb foundation, last half of April. But here under Tennessee conditions, we would say you want to get them as early as you could possibly get them. And so undoubtedly sometime in March. As we said, notify the post office of the arrival time so they can contact you. Once you get them from the post office, you need to store them in a cool, dark place until they can be installed. 50 to 60 degrees would be ideal temperatures in which to store them. Some people will say I can only install them when the weather's decent, but I've known a lot of people that have had to install packages right during a snowstorm. But you want to store them in a cool, dark place until you can get them installed. All right. I like to spray or sprinkle syrup on the side of the package. Give them food, even though they've got a feeder can in this package, which we'll show you in a minute. I like to, until I can get them installed, I like to sprinkle a little syrup on the side of the package, and the bees then will gather it and use it. Do not brush syrup onto a screen. You've got a screen cage, and you'll find some literature that'll say brush sugar syrup on the side of the cage, but you damage the bees' tongues, you damage their proboscis. So do not brush it, just spray it. Spray it onto the surface of the screen. All right, now you need to prepare to install this package of bees, and there's a lot of different ways in which you can do it. All right, so I have here a bottom board on a hive stand, an entrance reducer, and I like to put some green grass in that small opening of the entrance reducer, as you see there. And I've removed either 6 or 7 combs where the bees are going to be received into the package. All right, now, when I'm ready to install this package, I'm again going to sprinkle sugar syrup on the side of the screen. And I'm going to do it on both sides. And then I'm going to take this package and I'm going to jar it onto the edge of the hive and knock all the bees down to the bottom. And so we want them to get semi-wet, so to speak, with sugar syrup. Wet bees cannot fly, or we're going to reduce flight. Now, lots of times people will tell you, wait and introduce them in the evening. But if you wet them good with sugar syrup and it's not extremely cold, you can reduce the flight this way. All right, you're going to remove the cover on the package, as you see there, being removed, because you've got the hive all ready to receive them. And this is what you see. The center can in the middle is the syrup can. That's their source of food while they were in shipment. And the small silver piece of metal that you see beside the can is the end of the queen cage in which the queen has been shipped in. You remove the syrup can first. Now you see I've already wet them down. They're not flying, they're not crawling out. I knocked it on the ground or knocked it on the edge of the hive and knocked all the wet bees down to the bottom. Now I remove the syrup can, and then I'm going to remove the queen cage, and I'm going to look into that queen cage and see if she's all right. And as John told you last night, typically there will be 3, 4, 5 worker bees in there caring for her while she was in shipment. If she's okay, I just take that queen and queen cage and stick it in my pocket, because I'm going to continue with the rest of the the bees before I worry about her. Now you can be real, you don't have to be real gentle when you're emptying the bees out of the package. You're going to dump them right into the hive as we've shown is going on here. Again, you periodically have to stop and hit the cage against the sides of the hive and get them rolled into a ball again to dump them out. And you're going to dump as many of the bees as you possibly can out of the cage, or out of the screen cage. And so now we see we have a cage that's virtually almost empty of bees. And so then we set that down beside the hive. All right, now we take our queen cage. Now, if she's been shipped, say, for a week or more with these bees, we can directly release her into the mass of bees. And that's what we're doing here. We're taking the hive tool, lifting the screen off, and dumping her in. But if she's only been with those bees for a day or two, then we're going to have to leave her in the cage and put the cage in between the combs when we put the combs back in the hive, and keep her protected for a few more days before either they release her or you go back and release her. Now before you put these combs back in, you can take your hive tool and you can kind of level out the pile of bees that's in the bottom of the hive, this wet mass of bees, so to speak. And then you proceed to add your combs back in, and then add your inner cover and your outer telescoping cover. Ideally, you will want to put some type of feeder on them now that you've introduced them. So above these top bars, you would add another empty hive body, and you would have a feeder of some type in that empty hive body before you would add the inner cover and then the outer telescoping cover. When you have other colonies present, whenever possible, it's good to add some frames of sealed brood to the package that you've just installed. That'll get them off to a better start, a quicker start. As I told you, the population is going to go downhill for 3 to 4 weeks before the queen gets to laying eggs and new bees begin to emerge. And so by adding sealed brood to them, that's going to keep the population up. This is what it actually looks like. Across the bottom, we got 5 days, 10 days, 15, 20. See here, so at 21, we're still going downhill. And so if she's able to begin laying, if you got drawn comb, so she can begin laying on the first day that you install them, you will have new bees emerging on day 21. And as the bees emerge, then you'll see the population begins to go upwards. Here we see we have 11,500 bees, which would be a 3-pound package, but you can see how the population declines for the first 3 weeks. We have a question?
Yeah, I'm answering it.
Okay, John's answering it. As I said, you need to feed the bees. Even though you sprinkled them with sugar syrup, that's not much food. So they've got to have a source of food. So you need to do that when you install them. Then we would say leave the hive alone for at least 5 days, except to refill the feeder. The reason being is we have a new queen in there. If you directly released her, or we hopefully have a new queen in there if they've released her after a couple days from the cage. But the bees are still becoming familiar with her. And sometimes in those early days of a new queen in the population, if you disturb them, they will ball her or kill her. And so we would say leave the hive alone for at least the first 5 days, except to refill the feeder. After 7 to 9 days, examine the hive briefly to see if the queen is accepted and has begun laying eggs. Okay, I'm not gonna go into that. Packages can be also installed above a double screen. Again, I'm not going to go into that tonight because I think the bulk of our audience are beginner beekeepers and they're not ready to learn about double screens, so we won't go into that. That basically is how you would install a package of bees. As I say, there are many different ways of doing it. John may want to make some additional comments in regards to it. If you get a nuke, basically, I'm going to do the same thing that I did with, and I had some pictures, but they're in a different presentation. If I've got a 5-frame nuke, I'm going to set up my hive. It's going to receive the combs from the nucleus colony. I'm going to put in an entrance inducer, and I personally like to use the green grass. I'll come back and answer why the green grass in just a minute. And then I'm just going to take the combs out of the nuke box and put them into the hive one by one in the same order that they were within the nuke box. And then again, it would be best if I would add some food, even though it's a nuke and they have some frames of food and brood, etc. They don't have much food. And so it'd be good to feed them and to close them up. Now, why do I use the green grass? Again, we dump the bees in there. They get on either the frames containing foundation, and they have to begin producing wax and building comb so that the queen will have a place to lay eggs. Or if you've installed them on drawn comb, they have not had the opportunity to take orientation flights and to know the landmarks of how to get back to this hive. And so by putting green grass in the entrance, as it dries, it withers, and the bees then in a matter of a few hours can remove that grass and then begin taking orientation flights. And so we don't lose a lot of bees and they get lost during the installation process. And so so I use sugar syrup, sprinkling, and the green grass to reduce flight and loss of bees. If it's real warm weather, you don't have to use sugar syrup. You can just use water and do it the same thing. John, you want to make some additional comments to them in regards to installing packages?
One thing, we had some questions in the chat about feeders. I like to, I've used hive top feeders where you can pour maybe a gallon or a gallon and a half in the top and let the bees come from inside the hive and go up inside of that feeder. One thing you got to be aware of when this package first comes, they're not going to be sugarholics yet. So, they may take 2 or 3 days to even eat up what's in the container with them. And so what you can do is you can even set the feeder that comes with a package inside that hive and surround it with another box and let them feed on that. And if you want a internal feeder, you can make one that's got a screen over the bottom and a mason jar, 1-piece lid, and just poke you a few small holes and set that right over that screen, and the bees can feed through that. Something that we like, and I was trying to get AT to find one, but who knows where they're at. The juicy juice jugs that you get, apple juice or cranberry juice or whatever, they're about I think they're a half a gallon, maybe a little bit more. Mr. Ed Holcomb got us started using those several years ago. You can drink the juice up and then rinse it out good, and you've got a ready-made feeder. So what you do is you punch about 5 holes on each side, but you only do it on either the top or the bottom of that jug, and put you about 5 holes down one side and 5 holes down the other with a little thumbtack or a push pin. And you've got a ready-made feeder that'll hold up to a half a gallon. So you don't have to go out and buy all these expensive feeders. And one lesson that you'll learn really quick, a lot of these feeders that hold a whole bunch of volume, you have to be careful, because you can drown the whole package of bees, because they get in like a feeding frenzy and they start going in the top of your hive and get over in it and drowned. So this feeder that I'm talking about is basically totally sealed, and they can access it from inside the hive on the frames.
Tell them to turn it over so that the holes are down.
Yeah, you have to turn it over, and it'll create a vacuum, and it won't drip because you only punch small holes. And you can keep a check on it, and a package when they first start out, that should last several days. And
Hey, John, a question just came up about should one feed pollen as well? And I don't know if that's referring to package installs or not.
About the time when the time you get packaged bees, there'll be a lot of stuff blooming. I in warmer weather, I think you'll have more problems with small hive beetles. That's a place for them to hide if you put a pollen patty on there. I think on a package, you're warm enough. You don't need that extra pollen because they're not supporting enough brood yet. So I would avoid feeding the pollen patties.
Right. Just for general info, I went into all 6 of my hives today, and there were bees in all 6 hives that had pollen on their back legs. So they're foraging it somewhere.
Yeah, we've got maple. We've got maple, which will be a red color. And then we've got henbit. It'll be like a purplish gray color. And we saw some bees here in the queen yard this evening that had white pollen. I don't know where in the world they're getting white pollen, but and there ought to be quite a bit of yellow pollen starting to come in from dandelions. And that's one thing about having bees in town. You got hundreds of acres of yards that are full of dandelions, and dandelions could be one of the best pollen sources probably that we have, especially in town, because everybody's got dandelions. And that pollen is really good because it's available. And then we have a cold snap and it kills it off or burns it off. And then the next day when it warms up, you have more blooms pop out. So dandelions are a real good source. We got more questions?
John, a question just came in about the juice jug that you talked about. Where should you put the jug?
What I do on a package, when I first install them, you don't have a whole lot of bees to conserve heat and that sort of thing. What I do is I put it directly on top of the frames, right over the center. And that way the bees don't have to go but maybe an inch and a half to get to those holes. Now, after 3 or 4 weeks, and they're filling up, they're drawing the comb and building the comb in that first box, you've got to keep a check because the bees are lazy. They'll make them a wax ladder up on the side of that jug. So then they'll say, well, our food's here, so we're just going to start building wax on it. And they'll actually build wax on that jug. And before you know it, the queen will be up there laying on that side of that jug. So you've got to, after so long, when that bottom box starts getting full, you got to put your inner cover back on, and then you just set it over to the side of your inner cover. And by that time, you may be ready to add another brood chamber.
Right. And I just,
Also-
when I do
also
mine
stick.
like yours, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah. You need to
When I put
some
those
sticks.
jugs up there, like you'd suggested before, I put an empty medium box up there and set the jug right on top of the frames,
Yeah.
and then set the cover on top of that empty medium box.
Yeah. You want to, when you put that, when you move that feeder above your inner cover, you need to put some sticks so they can access it from underneath. If you don't, they won't be able to get to the holes. Just some little 1/4 inch sticks or anything you can pick up in the bee yard. And that feeder, I guarantee you that feeder will, you'll be as happy with that feeder as a $35 or $40 feeder that you buy. More happy, less bees drowning, whole 9 yards. Now, you want to feed a 1-to-1 mix. That means 4 pounds of sugar, 4 pounds of water. You can either do it by weight or you can do it by volume. But early in the spring, I like to get as much sugar in that water as I can get. So you may want to heat it. And you got to remember that when you get this package of bees, it's cold weather. Later on, after 2 or 3 weeks or a month, you're going to start getting in warmer weather, and that sugar will ferment. And when it ferments, you'll notice you'll start growing mold and slime, and you'll be making rum on top of your beehive. And they will not take it. So you need to keep that stuff pretty fresh. And I have a lot of people that if they get a package and they mix up a gallon, they'll put so much in that feeder, and then they'll put the rest in the refrigerator. And that extends the life of your sugar water. Now, if everything's going right in that hive, they'll think you're making moonshine at Kroger's. You'll be buying so much sugar because they'll start putting it away. And then there'll come a point in time when they start, maybe 6-8 weeks, when they start getting enough foragers out, they'll slack off that sugar, and that's the time to quit. Because I don't like welfare bees. I like to let them do it on their own if they can. We have more questions? How many people in the group have bees already? It's hard to get
I started last year with the bees, but I have to admit, last year I did not have a lot of time to take care, so my husband had to install them for me. Hence, this is why I'm taking this class again, just to know what to do this spring, and I hope everything is well, fingers crossed, in the hive.
Yeah, and one thing that we don't try to discourage anybody, but the reason I do that pitfall talk is those are some mistakes that maybe people can learn from my mistakes or other people's mistakes to help them get started off to a better start with their bees. One thing that I see a lot of beginners do is they don't have enough equipment ready. Or a lot of people, once they get the bee bug, it turns into an addiction, and they got one hive, and then you talk to them in 3 years, they got 10 hives. Then they're out catching swarms, and catching swarms is fun. But what they'll do, I was in a hurry. I had to go to a meeting, or I had to be somewhere. I caught a swarm, and I only had 3 frames in the box. Well, 3 days or 2 days turns into 3 days. And then before you know it, you got a hive that you caught that's a mess. And basically you've taken all that work that those bees have done, and you got to go in and cut it out and straighten it back up. So one mistake is never, ever leave a frame out. Don't leave a frame out. If you have to leave a frame out, you need to look up and search what a follower board is. A follower board is basically a solid board. If you got 4 frames in there and you need 10, you need to put that follower board, needs to be your 5th frame. It'll be a piece of wood that goes all the way from the top to the bottom. What that does, it helps stop your bees and let them work on the frames that you have. But empty space is a no-no. Somebody asked about a mentoring program. There's not really a official mentoring program, but what needs to happen is wherever you're located, whether it's Murfreesboro or Lincoln County, here or Tullahoma or wherever, you need to get in contact with your closest local club and say, hey, I'm starting out with bees, and I need somebody to talk to. It's like a self-help sort of thing. It's like Beekeeping Anonymous or whatever, but you're going to get somebody that's experienced with that club, maybe to come and give you some pointers. And one big thing is you don't need a mentor to do everything for you. I know we've helped mentor some people, and we were basically doing it all. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to kill queens. You're going to install frames or build your frames wrong. Things are going to happen. But the only way to learn in a beekeeping project is you're going to have to go down in these hives and see what's going on. I know I've had a lot of beginners that they're so terrified to go down in the brood chamber. So you'll go to help them in July or August or September, and you can tell the frames have never been taken apart. If you don't know what's going on in there, you don't know if you've got a mess or you're queenless or whatever. And as you learn, you can tell a lot about what's going on at the entrance of a hive.
Need to explain to them how they need to use the thin nails.
Yeah. We got a
Hey,
question.
John,
Yeah.
there's a couple things that have come up. It's can we get the recorded videos and PowerPoints emailed to us so then we can refer to them again? And if I can we'll collate those and we can email those out. Then there's another question. Is there a place I could bring my honey frames to be able to centrifuge honey, or do I have to buy all the equipment? And that goes back to local bee club sometimes has that capability within itself.
Yeah, here, anybody that certainly wants to join our club, we're located in Winchester. We actually, I think in 2000, we had a group of beekeepers from the Duck River Association. They came over and sort of helped us get started. And then we had members from about 8 or 9 counties that came here. And now the Lincoln County, Ron and some of them have started Lincoln County Beekeepers Association. We sort of try to help them too. But what we've got here at Winchester is we've got 4 or 5 extraction units. We've got some that can be checked out and you can take them home and sling your honey. Then we've got some that are more commercial size units where we actually have people come here and use our honey trailer to extract honey. We just need to know ahead of time so we can schedule and make sure.
Haven't done it before, do it with someone.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Ron, the Elk Valley Club and the Lincoln County Beekeepers, we're going to try to have a field day in conjunction with this beginning course. And the Lincoln County group's going to be the host club, and we may do it here, we may do it somewhere in Lincoln County. What I always try to do in the field day every year is we try to show people how to get off honey, how to test the moisture, how to uncap, how to extract it, and how to bottle it. So that we've got that opportunity here. And I know Ron and them just getting started, and then this pandemic hit. As they get to memberships and all that, then they'll have equipment and stuff like that, probably that they can loan out, or you can go to another beekeepers and use their equipment at their place.
John, another question. How large does the colony need to be to split? And it goes on to say, I started with 1 colony last year and I would like to split instead of buying more packages if possible.
Basically, you can, what I always like to do if I'm going to split, make sure that I have an available queen source. Now, some experienced beekeepers will split their own hives, let them raise their own queen, that sort of thing. But since we got small hive beetle populations just about everywhere in Tennessee, that makes it a little more difficult. So what I would plan on if I was going to split, one, can I get a queen? And I'm going to wait till I actually get that queen in hand before I go and split. If you've got 5, 6 frames of cap brood, depending on if you're wanting to hold that other hive back or whatever, I mean, that's all you really need to make a split. But you've got to realize that anytime you take resources out of one hive, you're messing up that balance. So I like letting a hive get established. About the time I'm going to start putting honey supers on, if I'm going to split, you can go and take 2 or 3 frames of cap brood and bees and take them to another location. If you set it right beside, a lot of times if you set a nuke that you split off right beside the hive, a lot of the bees, especially the older bees, if there's any field bees at home, they'll all go back to the mother hive. So to be successful, I like to move them. Take your frames, your brood, and you want a little or all of the 3 things that Dr. Collison showed you earlier, and 2 or 3 of those frames with the bees on them, take them to another location and install your new queen. You can make it difficult, and there's probably 1,000 ways to do it. But the main thing is you got to have a queen. I want a queen that's already laying too.
John, another question. Do you have to take honey out or can you leave it for the bees?
If I've had people that just wanted pollinator hives, they'd go buy these real decorative beehives and put in a garden. They want to put the bees in, they want to walk away, leave all the honey, all that. You got to think about what's going on in that beehive. Once it gets full, it's like us with a garden. We've canned, we freezed, we got enough stuff for 3 years, and we just forget about that garden. Those bees are the same way. Once they get that hive full, they say, wow, we've got enough to survive the winter. We don't need anything else. I'm getting crowded. I don't like Bud rubbing in elbows with me. And bam, they start swarming. So taking honey, adding more boxes, letting them work is a major way to keep them from swarming. So it's basically when that hive is full, they're going to start looking for other stuff to work. And a lot of it will happen by the way of a swarm. So if anybody in this makes a bunch of honey and they don't want it, call me or one of the other members. We'll come help you get it.
All right.
Honey is liquid gold. And that sort of helps you pay for this expensive addiction.
35 pounds for a medium box full times 5
Yeah.
wholesale.
Basically, AT was talking, if you had a medium super full, 35 pounds times $5, it don't take very long to pay for a package of bees. One super will pay for a package of bees. But established hive we've had some make 10, 11, 12 supers in a year. We didn't last year, but the year before, we had some hives that looked like little statues out in the field. And it goes back to that thing about the garden. We've canned everything, we froze everything. So we don't have any incentive to go out and weed that garden. If that beehive is working, if that beehive's working good and you don't put any more boxes on, once they're full, they're going to quit. So what we do is we keep adding boxes, moving them up, adding boxes, moving them up. And that gives the bees a sense of, wow, I don't have as much stored as what I think. So we're pushing them. We're actually pushing them or leading them on to think that they need to keep working. Years ago, about the time a lot of the varroa mites and stuff started coming in, we had a lot of older beekeepers. And what they did, they basically had a brood chamber and they put one super on, and when it was full, that was it. We've got hives now it's making anywhere from 150 to 200 pounds of excess honey that we're taking a year. We had a question in the chat. Is it better to have more hives or taller hives? I'd rather have one strong hive than 10 weak ones. And that being said, I'd rather have 1 or 2 hives in a location than I would to have 10 in a location. I knew a gentleman that had 10 hives and he could make more than a lot of people that had 30 and 40 hives. You've got robbing, you've got competition, you've got more management. And when a hive is going good, you don't want to really interrupt it. You want to let it go and make all the honey that it can. Yeah,
So somebody wants to clarify that, John. So I guess the preferred thing would be to put more boxes on one hive instead of having multiple hives.
If life is good in that hive and it's working good, you don't want to stop. Sure as you go out there and you got 7, 8, 10 boxes on this hive and you don't give it any more or take some of it, then the next week you'll go in there and they'll have queen sales. So if you get a hive that's really going good and you've got 7, 8, 10 boxes on it, once you get honey capped you can take it off. But put another box on. I've had hives that 6 or 8 hives in a yard, and I've robbed them, took it home, extracted it, brought it right back after a couple of days, put it right back on. I've had some hives fill the same boxes 2 or 3 times in a season. And it depends on the weather. It depends on where they're located. The pH of the soil is very, very important. I can take you to places where the pH is low, and you can have as many hives as you want, and they'll never do anything. You go to the right location where the fields, the farmers have kept the pH up, and the bees will fly miles just to get to those fields because they get more rich nectar.
Another question, John, how much honey do you leave and what is considered excess? And I'm assuming in prep for winter, how much do you need to leave on the hives?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 trains of thought. What a lot of us are doing now is basically in October, we go and remove all the excess honey above the brood. And what we do then is we put a sugar mix. We put a sugar mix that has honeybee healthy, apple cider vinegar, and citric acid in it. We make a shim, and we put that right on top of the brood, and then we basically pour this sugar mix right on top of them. And what we found that when we lost hives, big hives that we left excess honey on, we'd find them dead with 2 and 3 supers of honey. They weren't starving to death, but they were freezing basically because they won't move that cluster to get to that honey. So the weather we're fixing to go into, 2 weeks of real cold weather where they're not going to fly, that's when they'll starve to death with all this extra honey on them. What they do in the hives that we put the sugar mix on is they go in the hive, and when it gets cold the first night, they cluster on the bottom of that sugar mix and they don't leave. So they're always in contact with that food. Now, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, when the weather warms up, if we don't go and make sure they still got that on there, then the next cold snap, they may freeze because they'll starve because we didn't make sure they had this sugar mix on there. But our losses with this sugar mix have been a lot lower than it has by leaving 50, 100, or 2 supers or whatever on top of them.
45 to 50 pounds is,
Dr. Collison says 45 to 50 pounds.
if you're just going to leave honey.
If you're just going to leave honey. And medium weighs what, 6, 8 pounds?
Maybe you have about 30 pounds of
I
honey.
know I'm talking about per frame.
Divide by 10.
Yeah,
About 3.5.
about 3.
A medium weighs about 3.5. A medium frame weighs about 3.5 full of honey. We talk about a deep, that could weigh
About 6.
about 6 or so.
Yeah.
And that depends on, of course, the moisture content when they did it, but it's not going to vary a whole lot.
You need that fall honey photograph.
I know this hadn't been the preferred delivery method of this course, but what we've tried to do is hit on some of the high spots, the main spots to help you get started. And when you get this Beekeeping in Tennessee manual, it'll have some guides to go by. But one thing we want to make sure is that if you're interested in bees, you need to get with your local club and get a mentor, or I'll make sure that you have my contact information and have Ron's contact information. And that way we can, we can get in touch with you and you can get in touch with us if you have a problem or you need mentoring. I try to mentor as many people as I can. And we'll try to get copies of these PowerPoints in some format where they can be emailed or something. I know it'll be pretty lengthy, but I think they'll come through probably over internet. All right. And
Mailing.
oh, on the frame nailing, I meant to bring a frame tonight, but when you buy a box of frames, if you buy 100 from like Kelly's or a lot of these places, you're going to get a diagram in that box. You can staple, you can nail, you need to glue and nail or glue and staple. And do not depend on those nails or staples in the top to hold your frame, your sidebars to that frame. That frame needs, I'm trying to count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 10 nails. And if you leave any combination of those nails out, you'll regret it. Because the first time when the bees glue those frames together and you're in there with your hive tool, you'll start trying to get them loose and you'll pull the top bar off your end bars or sidebars. And I like sticking with one type frame whenever I order. Preferably now, I like a solid top with a wedge and divided bottom bars. And those help by not having excess space where the small hive beetles can get and hide. There's 2 nails on that frame that are most important. They're on the top part of your sidebars where it connects to the top bar. You need one on each side that goes through and ties that sidebar to that top bar. And we call those the money nails. Now, small hive beetles, they're very easy to see when you're Dr. Collison's got some pictures and he said he'd put a PowerPoint up here to show you some of these pests. I'm going to, after he starts, I'm going to, I'll put my contact information. I'll put my contact information in the chat. Y'all can get me on Facebook or I'll put my email and I'll put my cell phone. And it's easy. A lot of people, I've met people all over the state. A lot of people message me on Facebook Messenger or whatever. And I don't have a problem with that, especially in these times where we're social distancing and we're not coming into the office as regular as we normally were. But anybody is welcome to join our club or Ron's club, or even I know Rutherford County has a real active club up that way. Good sources of purchasing what, equipment or frames or whatever. Okay, Bon Aqua Springs or Maple, what is it now? Maple Bend. He's a real good guy. Walter T. Kelly, which is now owned by Man Lake's a good source. We buy a lot of wooden wire and boxes from Zook. It's still Albert in it. Albert Zook in Lawrenceburg.
92 Hudson Road.
92 Hudson Road is his address. I'll put it in the chat. you have to write him a letter or somebody that's going down there, see what inventory he has.
Not open on Thursday,
He's not open on Thursday.
Ascension Day. Whatever.
He uses Zook uses builds a lot of most all the boxes out of Cypress. And Dawn said that she's going to Mr. Zook's in probably the next few weeks if anybody needs anything. Also, last night when I had my COVID brain moment, that what you want to treat those boxes, a lot of people are treating them with Echo Stain. And it's a really good product. It's a lot easier to use. And you can buy it. You can find it.
Zooks has it.
Zook has it too. We're gonna let Dr. Collison share his pictures here.
Look that up on any.
Yeah, the Echo Stain.
A high beetle, anything.
Yeah, but he got some pictures here. He'll find them. If y'all hold on a minute, if y'all want to take a 5-minute break, we'll see what we can come up with. No contact number, no phone. I'm gonna mute.
trying to look through one stuff, if they got to take a break, and put them down. Here, it's next, what's their slide?
No, that's not the right one.
The wrong one.
Mm-hmm. What do we have to do now?
But new share.
Okay, one's done.
Is that the one?
Well, I'm gonna No, that's it. That's not it.
We might have to go. Totally.
We can just forget it, I guess.
We can go totally back. I can get pulled up there. We'll give them a few minutes of a minute. Just click OK back at first.
I'll let you do it. You know.
Find it. We're trying to find it. We'll have it here. We got it on here. We just got it.
It's the one that's.
That ain't it, is it?
Well, we have to scan to see.
Now I lost my cursor. Cursor's up there. What that is? This is 2 of 71. This is it, ain't it?
I think so.
Okay.
The one that you had on the desktop was last year's and then only, that's why it stopped before I got to.
This is it right here, I believe.
Yeah, that's it. If we can figure out how to. I'll just back it
I've
up.
got to minimize it or something. I got to end show.
Okay.
We know which one it is. Now, we're gonna start share.
So it's this one, wax moth.
That's it.
No.
Okay, I think we've got it loaded where he wants it.
Apologize for the delay. All right, you wanted to see what the small hive beetle looks like. This is the adult. It's a little bit smaller than the size of a ladybug. But this is what the adult looks like. This is what the larva looks like. You can easily see it. And you can see the projections here on the dorsal surface, the spines. And this is what a comb looks like that's heavily infested with the small hive beetle larvae. And here's one that's really badly infested with the small hive beetle larvae. So you can easily see them. Here we have a comb, and there's at least two, I can see 3 adults. Just to give you an idea of the size of the bee, there's, whoops. Okay. There's one adult small hive beetle. There's a second adult small hive beetle. There's a third adult small hive beetle. So you can easily see them with the naked eye, and they're very fast, very, very fast. Mice can be a serious problem in your hives. That's one reason why we use the entrance reducer in the fall for overwintering. It's not to help the bees heat the hive or keep the hive warm. The purpose of the entrance reducer is to keep the mice out. And usually in the fall, if you don't have your entrance reducers in, they will move in and take up residence. They chew the combs and frames, provide space to build their nest. They urinate on the combs and frames, which makes the bees reluctant to clean the nest out in the spring. And there we see a mouse nest inside of this hive. And that's the type of damage that they do to the comb where they build that nest. And so we want to keep the mice out. Some people use an entrance reducer and hardware cloth like you see on this particular slide. Now, we found this in a hive. Honeybees, anything that's foreign and that they cannot, that they don't want there, they remove it, or they try to remove it. But the mouse is too large. They probably have removed all of its hair, but they still cannot move it. And so then they entomb it in propolis. And that's how they deal with this invader. So here we have a propolized mouse. He pickled. Skunks can be a real serious problem. And John talked about armadillos last night. Skunks can even, a female skunk will bring her young to the hives at night, scratch the front entrance of the hives, and we'll teach them how to eat bees. I wanted to go back. I was going to go back and show you some other problems associated with beehives as well, if I can get it to return. We'll do this.
Why can you just come a little bit later? And one later. Through the summer. Pretty sure that it's problematic in the beginning of the
I'm going to go back and spend a little more time on diseases. I was talking about it with the first presentation. As we said, with healthy brood, the cappings are convex and yellowish brown in color, and normal brood is pearly white in color. And here we see a frame that's got lots of pearly white larvae in open cells. And certainly our conclusion would be what you're seeing there would be a healthy brood. we already had shown you this slide and the problems that it told you, so I'll move on. Here is a worst case scenario of sunken cappings and holes in the cappings. This happens to be caused by the bacterial disease American foul brood. Now, we said if it's not white, this happens to be a pre-pupa, and if it's not white, that says you have a problem. But when we have a uniform color change from white to, as you see here, this is evidence of American foul brood. Here's a pupal stage where you have uniform color change, and this is also American foul brood. And you'll see the tongue of the bee raising up to the surface of the cell, or the ceiling of the cell, I should say. And if you ever see pupal tongues, you don't need to go any further. That's a sure evidence of American foul brood. But I've seen rotten hives, just rotten with American foul brood, and never have seen a pupal tongue. But if you do see a pupal tongue like we see here with the uniform color change, you don't need to go any further. Again, if they were inspecting the hive, they would insert a toothpick or a stem of grass and stick it into the decomposing mass. And if it strings out in a ropey condition, like you see here, that's another way in which you can diagnose American foul brood. The other thing that you look for with American foul brood, and this is a very, very serious disease, and the colonies should be burned, the bees killed and the colonies burned. The other thing that you're looking for are scales. And you see in the bottom of these cells, scales that are adhering to the lower surface of the cell. The bees are unable to remove it. And each one of those scales is several 100,000 spores, which if that cell is filled with honey, that softens the scale, and then they rob the honey out and distribute the spores as they feed the young larvae, and the whole disease is then transferred to the larvae. It's a brood disease, and as I say, it's very, very serious. So you don't want to have scale.
You need to have an inspector.
Yes, you need to have an inspector come and verify it. There are actually kits now that they can use to identify American foul brood and European foul brood. They're kind of like pregnancy test kits, only specifically for determining those two bacterial diseases. Here we see one twisted in the cell. This is another form of European foul brood. I showed you some pictures of European foul brood previously. This is the slide that I showed you earlier. Partial change in coloration, twisting of the larva within the cells. We have another disease that's called sac brood. And the head end turns darker faster than the rest of the body. But as you see, here we've taken a pair of forceps and we've removed the diseased larva out of the cell, and it hangs like a bag of fluid or like a water balloon, so to speak. And this is called sac brood, and it's a viral disease. Another picture of sac brood. And again, the end that's attached to the pin, as you see it here, you see that end is turned darker. The head end is turned darker faster than the rest of it, but it's not pearly white. So that tells you it's definitely diseased. Another disease that you may encounter is called chalk brood disease. And it's a fungal disease. And this fungus attacks the exterior of the larva, causes it to dry down and harden. The reason we call it chalk brood, it's hard like a piece of chalk, or you might think of we sometimes call them chalk brood mummies, like similar to what you would think of with an Egyptian mummy, so to speak. This is chalk brood. This is a serious, or can be a problem in early spring. Larva actually needs to be chilled before this fungus germinates and attacks the larva. The darker one that you see in the upper right-hand corner, that particular fungus is reproducing sexually and has, the reason it's darker in color, it has sporangia, or produces spores. The others, the white ones, the mummies that remain white, they're reproducing asexually. We also have adult bee diseases. They're not normally as serious as brood diseases. This is sometimes referred to as the hairless black syndrome. If you see 3-4 bees crawling around, whoops, didn't mean to do that. You see 3-4 bees crawling around. They've lost the hair on the thorax. They've turned dark color, as you see here. They're unable to fly. This is called hairless black syndrome, or it's also called chronic bee paralysis virus. Unprotected combs can suffer wax moth damage. And so you have combs in weak or dead colonies or in storage areas. And if the temperature's high enough, the wax moth will lay their eggs, and then the larvae will begin to feed on it. It's a continuous threat except when temperature drops below 40 degrees. Here we see a couple wax moth larvae crawling on the inner surface of the inner cover. And with wax moth, if you see larvae crawling around in the hive, if there's webbing, it would be wax moth. If there's not webbing, likely to be small hive beetles. And I think I will stop there. Are there questions in regards to what I've just covered? Any questions? Okay.
How common is American foul brood in our area?
Probably around 1%, isn't it?
1 or 2%.
1 to 2%, yes. There will be hot spots. But as I said, it's a very, very serious brood disease caused by a bacterium that produces spores. And once your equipment is contaminated with spores, then you're going to have a continuous problem. You need to have a bee inspector get involved. And as I say, the ultimate control is burning the colony.
And if you register your hives, you may get compensated a bit from.
All right.
agency.
I wasn't aware of that, but if you register your hives with the State Department of Agriculture and you have some American foul brood, there is apparently some compensation if that colony has to be destroyed.
Do we have questions? More questions?
If they suspect anything out of the ordinary like that, get another beekeeper and hopefully an inspector.
Yeah. Okay. The point was just made. If you see anything that's not right, get a bee inspector, get somebody, get an experienced beekeeper to look at it. But more importantly, get a bee inspector to look at it. And I think I'm right on this, and John will correct me if I'm wrong. There are actually trained bee inspectors in the Elk Valley Beekeepers Club.
And I also think we have some in the Lincoln County Club too.
And he also thinks there are some in the Lincoln County Club as well. So there are local bee inspectors available for you if you have problems that need to be investigated.
Ask them if they have any more questions.
Any more questions? If not, John has promised that he will send you Beekeeping in Tennessee. And I think he provided his contact information for you so that you can contact him if you have any problems or need assistance. And it's been a pleasure working with you the last 2 nights, even though it's not like being in a regular classroom and seeing you eye to eye and being able to point things out to you. But hopefully we've given you enough information so that you can get off to a successful start in your beekeeping operations.
I have 3 questions for you.
If we don't have any more questions for now, we'll try to get these PowerPoints to Ron, and that way we can or get them to whoever's got the master list of the emails and try to get them sent to you. I certainly hope y'all have enjoyed what we've tried to do. Hopefully we made enough just to make you dangerous, but one thing you need to realize, if you can get a mentor, that will help. And also there's nothing like hands-on experience. Plan on attending our field day that we're going to have probably sometime in May. When we have some capped honey, we can show you how to remove honey, show you how to extract it, whatever. But I certainly appreciate everybody attending. And if you need anything, y'all have my email. And of course, you have Ron's contact information. And any of y'all, we'd love to have you either join the Lincoln County Beekeepers Association or our Elk Valley Beekeepers Association.
That's where you find them in there.
And that's where people that attend here, we can find a mentor. And the way to join is I'll put the address. It's $20 for a family.
For the year.
I'll put the address in as well, and Ron can type in their address. And we try to meet every month by Zoom while this pandemic's going on. It's usually the first Monday night. The second Monday night of each month. And we send out the Zoom links. I was trying to send it. Oh, I've got it on one person. I'm putting the address, and then it's $20 for a family or $10 for a single for a year membership. That's the address for where you can mail our membership to the Elk Valley Beekeepers Association. And Marshall County, there's a note in there that Marshall County is doing the course Friday, March the 12th at Henry Horton State Park. That's awesome. And if we don't have any further questions, we're gonna log off, and we certainly enjoyed it, and we tried to get done a little more timely than that. Appreciate it. For no other questions, we're gonna end it for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put my contact on here again.